I remember when the Pope came to New York, and of course there was a huge greeting for him at the airport, and they had the limousine and all there for him, and they said to him, now you've arrived, jet lag, and nothing's happening until tomorrow, so the evening's free, and you have your limousine and your driver, and also the evening's your own. So the driver's taking him to the hotel, and the Pope, he tapped on the glass and he said to the driver, he says, "This is a beautiful car." "What car is this?" "It's a Cadillac." He said, "Cadillac? Oh, it's a beautiful car. I never drive a Cadillac before in New York. You mind if I drive the car?" "Well, you're the boss. I mean, it's your show, you know." "Okay, that is great." He said, "I tell you what, you sit in the back, I drive the car." So your man gets into the back, the Pope gets into the front, shoe to the floor, and the other foot in the accelerator, straight into Manhattan. And he's going 90 miles an hour down Manhattan. I don't know if it's possible or not. And the next thing, there's a flashing light, and this policeman is on one of those motorbikes, and he's flashing past him, and he pulls him in, you see, and the policeman gets off, and he goes over, real typical, He goes to the window, and he says, "Okay, Buster, what the hell do you mean driving at 90 miles an hour in Manhattan? Who the hell do you think you are? Where the hell are you from?" And the Pope looks at me and says, I arrived today from Italy. He says, "I never drive in New York before." And just with that, the policeman starts to dawn on him. Yeah, this is the Pope. He always recognised him. So he says, "Just hang on there a second, my good man." He said, "I got to radio back to the officer." So he radioed back, and he says, "Get me the police commissioner of New York City." And your man says, he says, "I need to talk to the police commissioner." So they get the police commissioner out of the banquet the big buddy was at. The police commissioner, he says, "This better be good." He says, "Because I'm at a banquet with the Lord Mayor and with the whole lot." And he said, "Very, very good." He says, "Listen," he says, "I don't know what to do here, Commissioner." He says, "I just after pulling a guy doing 90 in Manhattan." He says, "You got me out of a banquet for some guy doing 90 for a traffic offence?" "No," he says, this guy, he's very, very important. He's a very, very important guy." He says, "Who the hell is he?" He says, I don't know who he is, sir, but he must be important because the Pope is driving him round." I walked into this bar one day, and it was a quiet bar. I was ordered a drink, and I looked around. There's a fella sitting, a man sitting at a table drinking his pint, and I was talking to the barman a second, and the next thing, this lorry pulled up outside, one of those 40-foot, And just with that, I heard this noise. I looked round, and there's your man sitting at the table, and he's shaking like hell. The glass, the drink is spilling all over the place. Your man is in bits. And I said to the barman, "What's wrong with your man?" He says, "That's a sad story." He says, "About 20 years ago," he says, "your man's wife ran off with a lorry driver. And every time he hears the lorry," I says, "What was that?" "He hears the lorry now. He suppose reminds him of her." "Oh, geez, not at all." He says, "Every time he hears the lorry now, he's afraid that's him bringing her back." One day in the school, it was coming near the end of the class, and the teacher asked the children to go home and think of a story, write out a wee story that had a moral in it. So they all came back, and the following day the teacher said to the first little girl, she says, "Now have you a story and tell us the story and what's the moral?" And she raised her hand and said, my daddy has a farm, and every Sunday we put chicken eggs onto the lorry, and we drive them into the town and we sell them at the market. And one Sunday we hit a big bump on the road into the town, and some of the legs flew out of the basket and got broke. And the teacher says, "Well, that's very good, but what's the moral of the story?" She said, "The moral of the story is, don't keep all your eggs in the one basket." "Very good," says the teacher, "very, very good." She says, "Now anybody else? Another wee fella says, we have a farm too." So he says, "We have a farm too, and we keep chickens' eggs, and whenever the chickens' eggs, we put them in a thing called an incubator, and we put these 12 eggs in the other day, and only 8 of them hatched, and what's the moral of the story here now? The moral of the story is, don't count your chickens until they're hatched." "That's very, very good, very, very good." Dan Murphy. Dan, do you have a story for us? "Oh, I have a story for you. I have a story. See, my Uncle Joe, he went to America, and he got drafted into the American Army, and he fought in the Vietnam War. And when he was flying on a plane, and the plane got hit, and he jumped out of the plane, and all he had with him when he got shot down was a case of beer, a machine gun, and a big machete. And on the way down from the plane, his parachute, he drank the beer. And he ran the whole case, and he landed in the middle of E-70 Viet Cong, and he started shooting them with a machine gun. He got about 6 to the machine gun, he got 5 with a machete, and he killed the rest of them with his bare hands. And the teacher says, "That's a very good story, Dan, but what's the moral of it?" He says, "The moral is, don't mess about with Uncle Joe when he's drinking him." Casey walked into a bar and he saw Murphy sitting at the counter looking bad, looking depressed. He went up to Murphy and says, "God," he says, "Murphy, you look terrible. What's wrong?" "Well," says Murphy, "do you know what, Casey? My mother died in May, and she left me 15,000. Oh, God, that's terrible, said Casey. God, that's bad news. And you know, he says, in June, says Murphy, my father died and he left me 20,000. Oh, God, that's terrible, says Casey. Both parents dead in such a short time. It's no wonder you're depressed. And last month, says Murphy, my Auntie Mary died and she left me 20,000. Oh, no, God, Murphy, that's a lot to deal with, says Casey. You know, 3 close family members dying there in 3 months. That's terrible. Oh, Murphy looked at me and says, and then this month, he says, not a penny, nothing. Parish priest walking down the street one day, and he looks across the street and he sees this little fella, little lad, and he's jumping up trying to press a doorbell, but he can't reach it because the doorbell is too high. And the priest watched him for a wee while, and the next thing he went over, and he leaned over the boy and he pressed the doorbell, and he bent down to talk to the little fella, and he says, now, my son, what will we do? The wee lad looks at me and says, Father, now we run like hell. It was a very special day at the play school, and all the children had brought in a present for teacher, and the first wee girl, her father owned the florist, and she gave her a parcel, and the teacher shook it and looked at it, and she said, I bet I can guess what this is. She says, is it flowers? And the wee girl's all delighted. She says, how did you know that? Oh, she says, well, just a lucky guess. And the next wee girl, her father owned the shop, and give her a wee box, and the teacher shook it and looked. She says, I bet you I can guess what this is. She says, I bet you it's chocolates. And the wee girl there said, oh, that's great, how did you know that? Oh, she says, it was just a lucky guess. Now, the next wee lad, his father owned the off licence, and she gave her a box, and she shook it, and the box was leaking. So she had a great idea, so she put her finger on the liquid, and she licked it. She says, is this wine? And the wee lad said, no, it's not. So she licked it again, give it a good lick. You know, is it champagne? He says, no, it's not. Oh, she says, I give up. She says, what is it? He says, it's a pup. And then there was this old fella, and he had a problem with his hard of hearing. He was hard of hearing, so he went to the doctor, and the doctor was able to get him fitted with one of those new hearing aids, and it allowed the man to hear better than he'd ever heard before in his life, and it was great. And about a month later, the old fella was back again at the doctor. The doctor says, well, listen, I've checked your ears again. Your hearing is perfect. Well, do you know, your family must be really delighted now that you can hear again. And the old boy looked at the doctor. He says, oh, I haven't told the family yet. He says, I just sit around and listen to them talking about me, and I've changed my will 4 times. One day Murphy went to an auction, and during the auction one of the items that came up for sale was a parrot, and he looked at it. God, he said, that's a nice bird, I wouldn't mind having that. So he started to bid, and he bid away and he bid away, and he kept on bidding, but the bids kept getting higher, and every time he bid so much money it would go further again, and he bid away and higher, and finally, after he was about 3 times more than he intended to spend, he finally got the bird bought, and he finally got the final bid. And afterwards, when he was paying the auctioneer for the parrot, he says, God, I hope to God this parrot can talk. He says, after the money I'm after having to pay for it. Don't worry, says the auctioneer. He says, he can talk. He says, who do you think was bidding against you? Murphy and Casey, they're out in the jungle. They're walking around. The next thing they saw, this tiger. The tiger was lying there. And they stepped on a twig, and the tiger heard the noise, and he turned around, and he started to charge for the 2 lads. Casey had a hold-all with him. He opened the hold-all, and he started to put on a pair of runners. Murphy looked at him. He says, don't be stupid. He says, you'll never outrun a tiger. Casey says, look at it. He says, I don't have to outrun the tiger. He says, all I have to do is outrun you. This woman and her husband went to the doctor because it was time for a check-up for the husband. So after the doctor had done the check-up, he called the wife into the office on her own, and he said, listen, missus, he says, I have big news for you. He says, your husband is suffering from a very severe stress disorder, and if you don't follow my instructions carefully, your husband's going to die. Now, he says, listen to me, he says, every morning, he says, you have to fix him a good healthy breakfast. Now, be very, very good to him at all times. At lunch, make him a lovely big lunch, very nutritious. And for dinner, prepare a lovely, lovely meal. And this has to be done every day. Now, don't be bothering him with stuff to do. Don't be getting him to do any work around the house. Don't discuss your problems with him. Keep him to yourself. Don't be stressing him. It's only make his stress worse. And don't nag him. And most importantly, make love to him regularly. And if you do all this, say for the next 10 months or a year, he says, you know, I think your husband will regain his health completely. So on the way home, anyway, the husband says to her in the car, he says, what did the doctor say to you? She says, the doctor says you're going to die.